Hey everybody, let's talk about communication. Communication is one of the most fascinating aspects that we can talk about. That's what communication is. It's really talking. The next slide we'll talk about says sharing. Sharing, same thing. We're sharing something that we have with somebody else. What's interesting about communication is it's seen as the bane of existence for so many people. People will say that if only a person communicated better, or you don't communicate well, the message that you're sending, I don't understand. In the workplace, we talk quite a bit about this lack of transparency. I work in an organization that doesn't share their strategies or information with us. I'm often, as I say, left in the dark. Are we, though? People who often talk about the lack of transparency are the people who are not at the table, who are not shared with information that they think is vital to them. But should it be? Think about it. We as ourselves are in some way the holder of information that we don't want other people to know. It's no different in the organization. We don't know everything about everybody. Organizations aren't going to share everything with everybody either. They're not going to share their secrets of where their communication strategies are going to be, how they're going to dominate the market, their strategies to overtake the competition within a particular industry. That information, if it was communicated, can be quite damaging to their future. As a result, they keep it secret. There's a lack of transparency. Ourselves, we do the same thing. When we meet somebody, we're not going to be as open and honest about the information that we have because we think that it may be disadvantageous of us in creating a relationship with others. So communication is an interesting concept, one that's changing quite rapidly based on technology, which we'll talk about more. But communication, I often believe, is rarely the cause of so much of the conflict and the disagreements that we have. It's not necessarily a lack of communication. It all comes down to this. It's the message. If you have to deliver a bad message, no matter how you do it, it's rarely going to be seen as a positive type of message. It's rarely going to be seen as, wow, that's terrible. That message is so difficult to hear. But the way I heard it was great. I love the way you communicated it. So although I lost my job, you made me feel really good. Although I lost my house, I feel great about the way that the bank treated me. I just want you to know that you treated me so well. Yes, I've lost my job, but supervisor, the way you told me made me feel so good about myself. I know I'm going to lose my house and my car, but boy, you're a great communicator. I often tell a story of somebody who's rude to you, but they give you $1 million. You forget that they're rude to you. You just remember how great they are because they gave you $1 million. As opposed to somebody who's exceedingly nice to you, but takes away $1 million, if we all had $1 million. We would talk about how rude that person is and how dismissive that person is. How much of a thief that person was because they took $1 million, even if they took it legally. But yet if they gave us $1 million and they were rude, we often forget the rudeness. So communication, the value of, the perceived importance of it, often comes down to the type of message that you have to deliver. Deliver a better message, have a better chance of being a master communicator. Because communication is about sharing. And if you don't have something good to share, it's going to impact the way and the manner in which it's received. We have so many ways that we can communicate now, from telephone, YouTube, text, radio, television, newspapers, Facebook, email. You have to go far and wide not to find a tool that's going to communicate something that you would like to share with somebody else. Yet with all of these communication devices, texting is the most prevalent form of communication. Even though we can communicate one-on-one, verbally with individuals, we'd rather choose to just send them a message. Though the value of communication, the importance of communication certainly hasn't diminished. What has diminished is our desire to actually verbally exchange ideas and thoughts and opinions with somebody else. More and more we hide behind a facade, which we call texting, or social media. Texting has made communication so much easier and less complicated. We don't have to worry about having an exchange with somebody that they may miscommunicate, and then they may have some kind of negative interaction person to person. We can just text. Technology, of course, has made communication cheaper and far more accessible to the average person, but we don't use the technology in a manner that makes us feel closer, feel better, feel connected. In fact, we feel more disconnected today, more isolated. Some of these statistics are absolutely sobering. We've went from newspaper to television to social media. Has it been better? Some ways yes, some ways no. Newspapers, the very first newspaper, I always find this interesting, was in 1690. By 1950, almost every household received one. That's not that long ago. Talk to your parents, grandparents. They often had a newspaper delivered every day. Television as well. By the 1960s, almost every person had a television, or certainly access to, watched television on a daily basis, if not in their home, somewhere close by. As a result, almost 80% of people in the 1960s read a newspaper. Today, less than 20. There's about 60 million newspapers produced back in the 1960s. Today, only 31 million. In fact, our population has doubled, but we produce half the number of newspapers. Pretty amazing. What has changed? Social media. 43% of adults now get their news from social media. As a result, the number of journalists has declined from about 43,000 to 33,000 just over the last 40 years. Again, so many more people in the United States, so many fewer journalists. Some would say that's not a bad thing, but that often means that you're getting your information from people who maybe aren't seasoned or trained journalists. Again, newspapers to television to social media. In fact, 80% now of adults use social media. 80% of adults. That's just not people 18 years old. Adults. It was only 5% in 2005. So it's a dramatic increase. Almost 80% of people 18 to 28 are online in some capacity, often on a daily basis. There's only 37% of people who are over 65. But think about it, almost 40% of people over 65 are using a mode of communication that didn't exist even 20, 25 years ago. We're so connected to social media. 74% check Facebook daily. Even Snapchat, which is increasing in importance, 60% check it daily. Almost half look into YouTube on a daily basis. In the world, Facebook is in almost 30%. Almost 30% of the world is connected to Facebook. 2.5 monthly users. Can you imagine if you can send a message to 2.5 billion people on a monthly basis? Think about this, though. As much as we think we're isolated and not connected, we have a mechanism that can send a message to 2.5 billion people on a monthly basis. Just one mechanism. How can we be so disconnected? It's really very sobering. We're disconnected because the way in which we communicate. We don't communicate in a way that allows us to feel that we know somebody, that we can believe somebody, that we can create a relationship with somebody. We're moving now from getting communications from a place that's designed to deliver it to receiving communication to a place that's not designed to deliver it. We used to get professional communications from the workplace, even from media. Now we get it from individuals. We get it from somebody that we're reading from online. We see a post from Twitter and it affects us more than if we read a message from CNN or Fox News. Good? Of course. Bad? Of course. There's always good and bad in just about everything. The key is to take the bad and eliminate or reduce, or to take the good and to eliminate or reduce the bad. Why do we have so many different ways in which we communicate? It's just a more diverse world. more differing languages, customs, and cultures. And importantly, though, it's less of a desire for people to become more of one, and instead they want to appreciate their differences. There's fewer cultures that are trying to create one, even super culture, one in which people understand each other, and instead there's more of an effort to be more individualistic, to have their own customs, cultures, to not lose their, what we call identity, when you move or join some other group. Some of that's laudable, of course, but it also is more difficult to have an understanding. We'll learn that really communications is really just about understanding. It's sharing what we have in a way to understand what others have, to create this kind of relationship. It's more difficult now. It's more difficult because there's less, in some ways, of a desire to be part of a group and instead to be much more of an individual. There's also more ways to spend your time outside of having communication. From television, video games, social media, there's so many more competitions for our time. The ability, in some ways, to create this type of commonality through communication is becoming much more difficult. The average American now spends about 9 hours per day on some type of technology, TV, social media, etc. Not necessarily communicating with each other face-to-face or having even a conversation, but on some type of technology. Some people say texting is technology, social media is technology. So that is communication, that is connecting. There's some truth to that. But as far as actually having a conversation, that's what's missing so much. The average American only spends about 38 minutes per day socializing or communicating with friends and etc. Think about that. We spend 9 hours a day on technology, but as far as socializing, communicating with friends, we only spend 38 minutes a day. It's consistent with about 34% of people the age of 18 to 34 prefer to stay at home versus only 8% in 1970. That's not that long ago. Again, we tend to want to stay home more, often using some type of technology, as opposed to going out and communicating with others. When people feel like they're more disconnected from their world, it's often because they want to stay home. It's often because they want to communicate, not face-to-face, not voice-to-voice, but often finger-to-finger. It's harder to have a relationship with people when you have that type of exchange. And in fact, we should communicate, because if we communicate, then we can share what we have and what we know with others. At the end of this slide, I'll make a statement about what the importance of sharing is. But think about it. We communicate because we want to share something with what we have with somebody else. And it creates an understanding between people. By communicating, we create this understanding. And it establishes connections. So if we share what we have, we create an understanding between people, and this understanding connects us to each other. That forms a community. It forms a community among a disparate group of individuals that share similar hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and that appreciate differing cultures, customs, and traditions. Key words here: share, understanding, connection, and community. The value of communication, why we communicate, is all summed into sharing what you have, creating this understanding between people. No, you don't have to accept it. No, you don't have to like it, but you have to understand it. And once you understand it, then you appreciate it. You appreciate this connection that you have with people. Okay, I see where you're coming from. Okay, now that I understand why you said what you did, I feel more of a connection to you. Even if what they said and did was bad, you understand it, and then you can make a connection. And the more connections that we have, the more community we develop. The United States has a system of cities and states that in some ways have no understanding of others. If you live in one state versus another, it can often be difficult to really understand that person. Much different than some other countries like Japan and China, which have this common culture, background, histories. The United States doesn't have that. In fact, so many more countries are moving to having this lack of understanding, this lack of connection, this lack of community. Good thing, bad thing, it's just different. And what we have to understand is, in order to understand each other, in order to create a connection with other people, in order to create a community, we have to be able to share what we have and understand each other. And understand the differences and appreciate those differences. And then from there, we make more connections. It is an adventure. It really is. Differences are so appreciated in our world, except in so very few instances. We want to travel to different places because we want to see something different. We want to go to different restaurants because we want to taste something different. Our whole life is built on differences. But within that life, we also have to make these commonalities. Because only when we create these commonalities can we create these communities. And that all starts with understanding that it begins with communication, with sharing what we have. Again, we may not like what other people have to share, but we should understand why they're sharing it, and that allows us to make more connections. And as we make these connections, we should remember the aspects that best determine success in communication. First of all, we have to have an audience that's receptive to the message. Sadly, today, so many people aren't receptive to the message. It's a shame, honestly, that some of the people who watch CNN don't watch Fox News. Those who watch Fox News don't watch CNN. I tend to watch both. Do I agree with everything that's being said? No. But it gives you perspective. When we talk about people who want to stay more at home and only spend 38 minutes talking with friends and colleagues, it's because they often don't like the message. And we should like the message. And it may not be, maybe like is more of a strong word, but what we should do is understand and appreciate that somebody has a different perspective than ours. Doesn't mean that we have to believe it. But if we believe in freedom and the ability to say, to some extent, what you think and what you feel, then we should appreciate that a person has that right. So we should be more receptive to messages that maybe we don't like. This avoids these preconceived beliefs, our perceptions. And if we control our own ego and self-esteem, we find out that we are much more receptive to the message. And we hope the message is something we care about. Communication is stronger when we care about the message. Many people like sports or health or money. Those are issues that for them want to or allow them or prompt them to engage in this communication venture that we have. So if we have an audience that's more receptive to the message, who understands that it may not be the message I would give, but I'm going to listen to the message, I may learn something, I just may learn something, and it's an issue that we care about, and we also care about the relationship. Not just in the workplace, but the home place as well. We tend to have more success with the relationships if we care about the relationship, obviously. Similarly, we tend to have more success with communication when we care about the relationship, the person communicating with us. And then lastly, we have to genuinely understand the message. I think part of the problem that we have with communication is we don't spend the time to clearly understand the issue. It may be that so much of media doesn't exist before that we have to rely on untested, unproven thoughts, theories in our world today via social media. We rely less on research and analysis, less on facts and statistics, and more on opinions and perceptions. And that does affect the success of our communication. But appreciate that a differing audience than us is going to have a differing perspective. Good thing. But we have to care about an issue and the relationships, and we really have to seek to understand the issue. I'm not understanding the issue. Can you explain a bit more to me about that? And if we understand some of the pitfalls of communication, then we can actually become better communicators. How can we? If we were to offer some techniques to be better communicators, what should that be? What would that look like? The best communicators know the key point that they want to make, clearly understand. I've written some books and And whenever I talk to a publisher or somebody who's going to be working on my behalf to publicize the book, they always ask, give me the one line, the one sentence as to why somebody should buy that book or listen to your message. It's amazing how difficult it is to come up with one sentence, especially after you write a 300-page book. But that's the most important. Come up with that line. So know the key point and know who your audience is. Know even that the audience is not going to like the message. I was reading about some companies that are laying off thousands of people. I don't care how well you communicate that message. It's a terrible message to communicate. As a result, it's not going to be seen in the most positive light, no matter how well you participated. So understand your audience. It's not going to be a receptive audience. Can you imagine if you were to communicate with those same thousands of people that you're terminating, that you're laying off, or you were to say, I'm going to give everybody a 20% increase? Oh, they're going to think you're the greatest. Know your audience. Third is choose the right tool. The great news today is that there's so many tools that we can choose. We certainly do not lack in the ability to choose a tool to communicate our message. Texting has a role. Snapchat has a role. Instagram has a role. Facebook has a role. Each has an audience, and each mechanism has its advantages and disadvantages. Choose the right tool based on the advantages and disadvantages of the message that you have to send. Probably the most important to me is that facts and statistics trump opinions and generalities. If you want to have a greater influence in your environment today, focus on facts and statistics. Hopefully some of the statistics I talk about today reinforce the value of communication, the challenges of communication, but also the opportunities of communications. Fifth, perform, don't present. Try not to just present your information. Do it as a performer. Make it interesting, fun, exciting. Capture someone's heart. If you can capture their heart as opposed to their mind, you often have a better chance of being a more effective communicator. We remember movies that, as the expression says, that tug at our heart. Commercials within 15 seconds or 30 seconds are trying to relay to somebody how best to communicate with somebody else. They're not telling you what's great about their product or service. They're trying to get you to feel something about what they're presenting. Those are the best communicators. And just 2 more slides. The opportunity for Communication Day has never been easier. It's never been more prevalent. In fact, again, going back to publishing books, it's never been cheaper to publish a book. It's never been cheaper to advertise and market a book. It's amazing. It's never been cheaper for one person to communicate to another. When you used to have to spend many dollars to communicate with somebody overseas, it's free today. All you need is a connection. We see that 60% of the population is connected in one way or another. You can sell just about anything, almost anywhere. It's fundamentally altered the basic business model. It's easier to create and market a product and service today than any time in history. We know about the Dollar Shave Club, eBay. You can buy and sell anything, anywhere, as long as you have access to communication and access to transportation. But yet, with all of this technology that allows us to build a bridge from one person to another, one country to another, as a society, we're becoming more isolated and solitary than ever before. We shop, eat, work, and converse without even leaving our homes. Almost 40% of people, younger people, would rather stay home than go out. 25% of all food orders are takeout. We don't even want to eat together. You look at statistics today, and so many more people would rather work at home, remote, than return back to the workplace. We see employers who are now having to force workers to get back into the workplace. It is the challenge of our age to create a community without meeting or interacting with those that share our world. Think about that again. The challenge is to create some type of community without ever meeting or interacting with those who live in the same world that we inhabit. Yet, it is communication that will create industries, build communities, and make the world better. But only by those, and here's maybe the most important part of my message, is those who learn what you can, share what you know, and contribute to something good. That's what communication is. It's learning everything that you can, and then sharing what you can with others. And if you can do that, then you can be a contributor to something good. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the day.